Welcome back to Touring the AFC South. I'm your host, Mike Patton. Of course, the NFL season's getting ready to kick off, but there's the NFL and sports, and there's the NFL off the field. The game that goes on off the field. The contract game. You see some living lavishly and getting deals. Way before the time's up on their deals. Majority of players, going into their final year of their contract in the field with the feeling of the unknown. And of course, as an agent, of course, you always, want to. I'm not an agent. I'm just saying, an agent. Always wonder how the agent is performing behind the scenes, what's going on, things like that. So I figured, since I'm not an agent, I'd reach out to an agent. So, welcome to the show, NFL agent Lonnie Nichols. What's going on, man?
Nothing much, Mike, man. I appreciate you having me on. How's everything on your end?
Doing well. I'm glad it's not like last week in Nashville and raining all the time.
Yeah. No, I definitely understand that. We're hot and dry right now in Oklahoma City. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
It's one place I've never been, but I want to go because I want to see a few different things out there.
Yeah. Well, it's growing, man. It's growing. I remember the days when it wasn't nothing to see, wasn't anything to see here. And it's certainly grown over the last 10 years or so.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to know, how did you get interested in the agent game?
So, like most of us, right? I mean, I grew up loving sports, man. I mean, I was a diehard sports kid. Wanted to be in the NBA, wanted to be in the NFL. I was a real smart kid, was really good in school, but you couldn't tell me that I wasn't going to be an NBA or NFL player. But uh, you know, high school came along, man, and it became apparent that that wasn't going to happen. Um, Man, I guess it kind of got started, man, is just my interest in the business of sports, just from a young age, man. I mean, I've watched every NFL and NBA draft since I was like 8 years old. Like I haven't missed one. Um, I remember when like when Drew Bledsoe got drafted. That was like the first NFL draft I kind of looked at as a kid. And I remember when Shaq and Chris Webber got drafted. And that was kind of like the first NBA draft I would kind of recall. And so I was always having an interest, man, going back and forth with my dad about, NBA free agency. I mean, I grew up a diehard Bulls fan. He was a Knicks fan because he was from New York, um, and was just always just paying attention to transactions and free agency and all that stuff. But I had no idea it was going to be agent. I didn't even know really what an agent was, really. Um, and then just kind of growing up, man, and went to college at the University of Oklahoma and graduated from there in 2006, and then 2009, man, I was lucky enough to join Oklahoma City Thunder, and that's kind of where the love of the business side of sports really developed. And so I worked in business operations when I worked there. I did that from 2009 to 2017. Uh, while I was working there, so I went back to school to get my master's in 2013. So to get my MBA, graduated in 2015 with that, and that at that point, that was when I was like, okay, I got this big fancy degree. What do I want to do with it? And up to that point, especially between like 2009 through 2015, so those first 6 years with the Thunder, man, I just really wanted to be like kind of in the room where it happened. You know what I'm saying? Like the Cole Hamilton. Like I wanted to be, where deals were being made and things of that nature. But I never really just thought about being an agent, man. When I thought about it, I thought about being on the team side of like a GM or something like that. I never really thought about being on the agent side really heavy. But I did flirt with a little bit in my brain. And so what really kind of lit the match there was a couple things. Um, Around that time, maybe a few months or a year before, something like that, that ESPN 30 for 30 special broke came out, and it was talking about how many athletes went broke, going through their professional careers. And that really resonated with me, just as a black male, knowing that we populate most of the NFL and NBA, and there's no reason why you make that amount of money come out on the end broke. There's obviously something wrong with that system in play. Uh, and in addition, in addition to that, work for the Thunder, and I got to see. I don't want to say a front row seat because I worked in business operations, not on the operations in terms of like scouting and front office side, but on the business operations side. So it's not like I knew the age thing like that. But when you work for a team, you get to see kind of things close up and act. So I saw, you would see Russ's agent, out and about, around the arena. You would see KD's representation, and they had really good, healthy representation. It was just really cool to look at. So looking at that from that perspective, um, I was like, man, I would really like to look into doing that. And so, as I was entering in like my last few months, trying to figure out what I want to do with this big degree, I really, really just kind of honed in on what it would be an agent, did the research and things of that nature. And I don't know about you or well, anyone that's listening out there, but you have these ideas, right? Things that you want to do, passions, that possible passion that you want to pursue, and usually if you think about it long enough, there are a few days, it kind of goes away. You're like, okay, I guess I didn't really want to do that. Well, the agent thing never left. It stayed. It stayed. It stayed for months. It never deserted. I thought about it heavy, and it got to a point where like, man, I really got to do this. Like, I really got to look into it. But was still unsure if I had kind of you know, the ability to complete it. So I was on social media one day and came across this just by accident a seminar being held down in Houston, an agent seminar, and it would be held by Lee Steinberg. For anyone listening, Lee Steinberg is widely regarded as one of, if not the best agent ever, at least definitely in the football space. He's represented Warren Moon, Steve Young, Troy Aikman. I mean, he's literally had Super Bowls where uh, he was the agent for both the quarterbacks facing off against each other. So this is like GOAT status. He's also Patrick Mahomes' agent right now. Um, and so I was like, all right. And when I saw it, the actual seminar, the actual event was like 2 weeks away. And I'm not really a spontaneous person. Like I'm the type of person, like if I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna attend something, especially if I'm gonna fly out of town for it. I like to think about it and mull over it and give it some time. But literally, it was like a last call. The event was 2 weeks away. And I kid you not, from the time that I saw that event to the time that I booked the tickets to the event as well as a plane ticket, probably no more than, 20, 30 minutes had passed. Because basically in my mind, I was like, I'm going to go down here and determine if this is what I want to do. Like this is it. Like no more flirting with it, no more playing with it. Like I want to be a part of the movement and part of change in terms of being a really good steward of this industry. So I'm gonna go down there and see if I got what it takes. So I go down there, fly down to Houston, and man, I loved it. I mean, it was. I don't really like sitting in a closed room for an entire day, but man, I was just wide awake. I was so interested in what they were talking about, and as I was leaving, so it wasn't just Lee Steinberg that was there. Like Lee Steinberg was like the name, and he kind of, he did a little part, but the meat of it was actually of the seminar was actually taught by Chris Cabot, who's his number. I don't want to say number two. So I don't want to misrepresent because Chris Cabot is definitely a stature, an ancient stature of his on its own. But he's like the guy that's kind of running things for Steinberg, and and so as I was leaving, and Lee was signing everyone, like Lee gave everyone a copy of a book and was signing everyone's book, taking pictures. I got my signed book, and I just wanted to shake Chris's hand, thank him for letting his expertise and knowledge. And there was like a big group of people around him, and I couldn't get to him. And so I'm like, man, I kind of got to catch a flight. It was time. It was getting close time for the takeoff of the airport. And I think Chris kind of saw that I was about to leave, and Chris was like, "Hey, Lonnie, before you go, I want to talk to you. So just give me a few minutes." And so everyone was like trying to get his attention, and that was the big crowd around him. And like while I was honored that he wanted to talk to me, stay, I'm like, man, I really got to get to the airport. But I waited, man, because this is a once in a lifetime. I mean, when an agent says they want to speak to you, you wait. So I waited, and long story short, man, when he finally got to me after he cleared everybody out, I was like, Lonnie, man, I just wanted to tell you that out of everybody in this room, uh, you're the only one I think that could really do this. I mean, I don't mean like just do it. I mean really be good at it, be successful. So I think you should really look at this as an option. And that was all I needed to hear. And so that was when I set my sights towards being an agent. So that was the summer of 2015. And the way you go about certification is the NFLPA opens up the application process every year in the month of January. So January of 2016, I put my application in, and then the test is held annually in July. So I took the test in July of 2016, and was lucky enough to pass. And then been an agent ever since, man. And to kind of wrap up the question, those are kind of the series of events that got me to becoming an agent. But going back to that 30 for 30 special, uh, that kind of triggered everything going forward this way. I basically have two pillars that I tell recruits or anyone that I'm talking to about the agent or why I became an agent. I have two pillars, man. The first pillar of why I wanted to become an agent speaks to that 30 for 30 special. It's not that like there's a bunch of agents and none of them care about players and yada 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 and players going broke. That's kind of a stereotype that does have a little bit of truth in it, but it's kind of over exaggerated to an extent. I mean, a lot of these young men do have to make choices as they get older, and so there is some personal responsibility there. But um, with that said, I do think that there is a level of not only care but professionalism and as well as some sense of value to the culture that is not heavily represented in being an agent. And what I mean by that is caring about your clients. And I hate using the word client because when I take on a guy, he's not just a client to me. He's truly someone that I truly value and care for, regardless of how long he plays the game of football. But not every agent thinks that way. Every agent will say that. Like that is a key word because they know that's what needs to be said to family. That's what needs to be said to the players. That's what they want to hear. But their actions say otherwise. To me, if a guy doesn't ever play it down in the NFL, I'm still going to be involved with him as much as I can to make sure that I can get him to transition into life after football. And make sure I'm there to help him carry them steps. Because if you could imagine any player that has any type of worthiness to be considered um, for the NFL draft, right? Any player that is, whether they make it or not, whether they ever get an opportunity or sniff one, you have to be a certain level of good, right? And to make it to D1 football, most likely the guy's a starter. Most likely the guy's contributed, for 4 years. And they become identity with this sport. Like that is their entire identity, many of them. And that is a hard separation when the game no longer is something that you can continue to play. And so whether that event happens, before it ever gets started or happens 12 years after playing in the NFL, their transition is still something that is, I was speaking with a guy the other day who was talking about that transition to life football. And he made it sound really easy. And I was like, man, I know it wasn't that easy. He's like, Lonnie, it wasn't. I make it sound easy because I don't feel like saying everything. But it really wasn't that easy. It's a transition. So I really care about their process. And so that's kind of pillar one is caring about these guys and at some point, women as well as I at some point venture into representing women athletes, but getting them to see the value of themselves beyond the sport that they play, and not just as a dollar figure, not just as an athlete, not just what they can do on the field, not just what they can put in my pocket. It's way more special beyond that. So that's kind of pillar one, is making sure I take a guy from college through his professional career all the way through to the to life after football and successful at that point. Pillar two, man, goes back to my time at the Thunder, and for people who don't know, like I said earlier, every team has two different segments, man. They have the business side and you have the operation side. And we speak a lot about the diversity issues on the operation side. So the coaching staff, the front office, those are well documented and very, very uh, uh, appropriately so. But what a lot of people do not realize or think about is on the business side, it is just as bad, if not worse. During my time with the Thunder, there was not a lot of representation from a diversity standpoint. And just that you can take that and just multiply that across sports in any segment, media, front offices, agents, et cetera, financial advisors, et cetera. So the second pillar is, man, is get to a place where my beacon shines so bright that I can swing the door open, get as many people of color, especially Black people, through that door. Because especially the two sports that I'm most interested in, I only participate as an agent in one of them, but football and basketball, we represent too much of the workforce that people pay their money to see, not to be part of the decision making process, whether it be from representation or business operations or front offices or coaching. So, way long answer, but that's kind of what drove me to become an agent, man, and then kind of the value system there.
Gotcha. And
Yeah,
definitely very good values and definitely some
yeah,
very good points that led you to where you are now.
right,
Like you mentioned,
mm,
before you became an agent, an NFL agent, you actually worked for the Oklahoma City Thunder.
right,
Um, can you tell us how it was being around that team just in general? At that time,
man.
like
It was
just thinking about it, it was like
yeah,
2009, 2017. That means KD was there. That means
right,
Durant was there.
right,
Harden was there too, correct?
yep, yep. Harden's
Okay.
year was my first year. Harden's
Okay.
first year was my first year. So, man, words it's hard to explain in words, but the short answer is, man, it was amazing. And one of the best examples I can give in terms of kind of the ride, or the amazing ride that it was so the team landed in Oklahoma City in 2008. um, I didn't join the Thunder until 2009, so the team had been here a whole season, a whole year by the time I joined the team. uh, Even after that year, and as terrible as they were, I want to say they were like 26 and what is that? 26 and 56, whatever that breaks out. Is that
Yeah,
AFC
that sounds
games?
about right.
Yeah. Very terrible team that first year. But nevertheless, the thing about Oklahoma City, the metropolitan area, is that it is a city that for my entire life, and I'm 37, it has been trying to build itself as a respectable metropolis, of the likes of the Dallases, the Houstons, the Atlantas, obviously it still has a ways to go to be looked at that level, but Oklahoma City views itself, or wants to view itself, as this major metropolitan center in the United States. And one of the biggest thing you can do, if not the most notable thing you can do as a metropolitan area, is have a professional franchise. And so it was a thing that the city itself has spent well over a decade trying to get to this moment where they had a professional franchise to call their own, not minor league, not a temporary franchise like the Hornets were for the 2 years they were here, a franchise that was truly their own. So finally, the team's here. Like I said, it's been here for a year, and I joined. And I started. The department I worked in was the sales. So we did everything from like your packages to your season tickets. I would end up becoming premium, so I was over the core side and suites areas, so making sure that the high value areas had partnerships and clients and companies aligned with those. But when I first started, man, we would call people, reach out to people, speak to people that had no idea who we were. Now, it don't matter if you're not a sports fan, it's okay. But even if you're not a sports, chances are you probably watch the news. And the news did nothing but talk about the Thunder for every day of that year. How is it that you did not know there was a professional basketball franchise in Oklahoma City? That's how that's how it started. Um, and then obviously my first year, so the Thunder's second year, my first year, that was the year that they ended up taking the Lakers, giving the Lakers everything they wanted. That was Kobe, that was Paul Gasol. Uh, that was that team that ended up winning the championship that year. Uh, the Thunder gave them everything they wanted in that first round, and that was when it put the city on notice. After that year, uh, there was there was no one in this state who didn't know who we were at that point. And that's when, the loud city moniker or the loud city reputation really took off, especially during that Lakers series. Uh, and to see it go from contact, reaching out to people who not knowing who we were, even though the team had been here for a year, and it was a really, really huge news event, really, really huge, like city pride type thing. To go from that to where you couldn't get a ticket to the building for years, or unless you paid a lot of money off the secondhand market. Uh, it was an amazing ride, man, because you got to see a young bunch of guys, and a lot of us in business operations, man, we were young too. I mean, I was 25 at the time. A lot of people were either my age or a little bit younger, so we were young professionals. And after games, man, we would go to a place called Mickey Mantle's, which is a downtown steakhouse, and the players would go there as well, but they would go into like a little private room. And you see these guys, man, they're super young. Like I remember Russ being like just a kid, Kevin being a kid. I remember James Harden like not even able to drink because he wasn't even of drinking age yet, and now these dudes are grown men, like not like they're not just like grown, like they're like grown. These are kind of old heads now. But I remember when they were just kids, and that ride, man, is just spectacular, man, especially going to the finals in 2012. That was spectacular. And as an Oklahoma City native, man, that was just a really big moment, man. I mean, if you guys remember like NBA Live, I know 2K is a thing now, but back in the 90s and early 2000s, NBA Live was the basketball game. And I used to
Right.
create a franchise and put it in Oklahoma City, man, because as much as I love the Bulls, as much as I was a diehard Bulls fan, I loved Oklahoma City, and so to be able to work for a team in my hometown, man, was spectacular, man. So it was amazing, man. It was a spectacular ride to see the things behind the scenes, how things work. Sam Presti, the general manager, man, we were lucky to have him there because he would take time to come speak with us and give us kind of what's going on with the team. So we would get like behind the scenes information about what was going on the team. If there was any transaction trades he made, he'd give us the thought process behind that and what he was thinking and why he did it. Uh, and not every GM does that. GMs don't really like to spend time with the business
Right.
operations team, but he would, man. He would do it at least once a quarter, if not more than that. And so, yeah, man, it was spectacular to be there.
Gotcha. Now,
Yeah,
transitioning to being an agent, how did
yeah.
that experience in the business office for the Thunder, and how did that kind of help you transition to being an agent?
A lot, man. It was a lot because of my background in sales. Like I said, I did sales for the Thunder, but even before that, man, like during my college years, man, I was a sales manager for Sprint, and then I ended up parlaying that into working for the Thunder. So at the age of 37, man, I have about 19 years of sales experience, and I use that every day in many ways, but not in the way that many people think. I think probably if someone who hasn't done sales or anything like that, they may be thinking, oh, like cheesy, you trying to convince someone to do something that they don't want to do, or not in that way. A really good salesperson, I mean a good one, not only from a quality standpoint in terms of their ability to sell a product, but from a moral standpoint as well. Not pushing something down someone's throat. Someone that leaves you with like a really good feeling that you feel like you bought something that was something of value that you could use, not something that you just bought because you were sold uh,
Right.
something just that wasn't really realistic. A lot of that, man, is people skills, listening, understanding, uh, trying to predict what this person will like. And so uh, I really honed those skills, those people skills, while I was with the Thunder. Now, a lot of it is just me, my personality. I pay attention to body language. I pay attention to tone of voice. Is there, kind of like if you're meeting with talking with someone, can you sense when maybe you might be annoying them? Maybe you need to back off a little bit. Can you read the signals when it's time to leave? Can you read the signals when it's you can proceed? I do a lot of that type of thinking in my head, which really benefited me in my sales career. Um, and so I really honed those from a professional level while I was with Thunder. So when you're sitting, so how does that work with as being an agent? Well, multiple ways. So when you're sitting, you're speaking with a prospective client. So you're speaking to a player that you're recruiting. These guys that you're recruiting, man, they're 21, 22, 23 years old. But they're still people. They're still people with feelings, emotions, interests, motivations, and things of that nature. And I think my background helps from a recruiting standpoint because, especially since my industry is heavily populated with attorneys who typically don't have that type of background with them. They know law, they know legal, but they're used to kind of sitting in the office and just, the phone rings and then they take a case. Or many people with law backgrounds never actually, they went straight into representation, never really kind of had any type of law practice. But either way, they never really developed that type of skill set. When you're speaking with a prospective player, you're doing a lot of listening, try to pick up little things. What do they like? One question I love to ask players is like, uh, what made them choose the school that they're at? Because I think you can learn a lot about their decision making process based off how they answer that. And so that helps me with that people skills. So when they become a client, whether I'm recruiting them or even after the fact they become my client, people skills, being of service to them. There are times where a player may say something, uh, and it's and he's not going to like what you have to respond with. So how do you respond to that without making them feel like you're not hearing them out? When you're talking with teams, how's your ability to network with the team and try to understand what they're looking for? There's a lot of people skills involved in all those aspects. In fact, I'll go as far as say as an agent, you can't be successful as an agent unless you have excellent people skills. Now, how you utilize those people skills, if they're for good or if they're for bad, if you're manipulative or not, that depends on the person. But at the end of the day, it's still, regardless of that mold, still involves a lot of people skills. And so that helped me, that time out with the Thunder helped me with all those aspects from recruiting to client management to speaking with teams to et cetera.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, now I gotta ask, what's easier, negotiating rookie deals for drafted players or undrafted players?
So first off, I'll say is that negotiating any type of rookie deal is definitely easier than it was before the 2011 CBA, where you had rookies who would sign these mega deals. Those contracts were just as hard to negotiate as um, any type of veteran contract because there was a lot of components with that. When they started to basically put have salaries slotted for draft picks, there's this perception that a lot of the negotiation for draft picks now is limited, and that is true if you compare it to the level of things that you needed to negotiate and work out comparatively to the contract that were done, like I said, pre 2011. But with that said, a drafted contract is definitely still more complicated than an undrafted one because as an undrafted player, unless you're one of the very few, you know, top 10% of the guys who are undrafted who have multiple offers from teams and you can have some wiggle room in terms of trying to find the best deal. 90% of undrafted guys who get signed, for the most part, have a take it or leave it type deal to them. You can try to do little things like, if they get 100% of their bonus paid out, within that first paycheck, or if it's going to be divided up in some sort of installment way. You can try to get them a little bit higher of a signing bonus, but there's really not a lot that you negotiate for an undrafted guy. 'Cause at that point, except for 90% of them, you're just trying to get them a team. And most of those guys have one, two, or three teams that maybe they can sign with. There's the top 10%, the guys that could have easily been drafted. Usually those guys where you write the article, you see the articles written the next day about the guys who should have drafted but weren't. Those guys, yeah, they get to have almost as much negotiation as a drafted player. Now, with that said, you also have to look at the rounds. First rounders, they have a ton they can still negotiate. So, in terms of bonus payout, what type of language is utilized in the contract. There are different structures that you utilize in terms of how bonuses are treated, et cetera. There's a lot of things that those done. That's why you still see this. You don't have holdouts anymore for drafted players, but you still see guys not signing, up until like training camp starts, while some guys may sign, at rookie camp. So the higher you are, the closer you are to the first round, the more there is to negotiate still. As you work your way towards the draft, through the draft, there's less and less to negotiate, and it becomes more of a just a take it or leave it deal. So,
Gotcha. Okay. So, can you take us through the process of how a deal comes together for an undrafted free agent?
so going back through draft night, so obviously the draft is 3 days. Day one is first round, day two is second and third, and then day three is rounds 4 through 7. Um, as you get to day three and you start to work your way into like the fifth and sixth rounds, teams that are real serious about your guy, they'll start reaching out during the draft, and they'll say something to the extent of, "Hey, Lonnie, man, we're interested in your guy. Probably not going to draft him, but if he makes it through the draft, we are going to want to sign him. So can we start to put the details of the deal together now, and that way we can get you wrapped up?" And that's basically what happens. And so when you're representing a guy like that, you're hoping that you can get at least 3 or 4 teams, if not more. And that way you could try to. That's why that saying about sometimes it's better to go undrafted than it is to get drafted in the 7th round. Because if you are part of that top 10%, you can actually a lot of times get a better deal as far as your guaranteed money bonus amount than you would as a 7th rounder. And the biggest kind of pro is you can direct where your guy goes to try to find the best opportunity for him to make the squad. So you could look at the roster. You can say, okay, I feel like this team might be the best fit for my guy. Does they can use some help? Yada yada yada. Um, and so you hope to be in that type of situation so that you can try to work out the best deal. You can try to get as much signing bonus dollars as you can. You can try to work on getting as much of their contract guaranteed as you can. Uh, and so that's basically how it comes together. So a lot of those picks, especially when you see the tweets going off immediately after the draft that this guy's going this way, you're like, how that happened? The draft just ended 2 minutes ago. That's because uh, all of those guys were already done. Basically, it was a gentleman's agreement. If your guy doesn't go to get drafted, we want him, and you'll give that team, whatever team you decide to choose, like, hey, listen, if my guy doesn't go drafted, we're going to you, and that's how it happens. Uh, Obviously, a lot of guys, a lot of players, they want to hear their name called, and while they do understand the concept of being able to pick where they go, and that's kind of cool. End of the day, 9 out of 10 players are going to tell you that the experience of hearing their name called is still something that they will prefer. And so, and also as a agent, it's just a little bit more security for you, even if that security is very minimal, to get a guy drafted compared to being signed at the draft. So, if there's multiple teams that have interest, you could try to use that to your advantage. Say, hey, listen, if you want my guy, you better come draft him. because we're going to go this direction if he goes undrafted. So a lot of those things are being done, through text, through phone calls, during those later rounds. And so, yeah, and and if you're a fan watching a team and you're like, man, why'd that team draft that guy or whatever? A lot of times there was a signal that, either A, that team just really, really loved that guy, or B, there was a signal that there was another team or something like that they were going to go in that direction. And so if the team really wanted them, they needed to take a flyer on that guy in the 7th round.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So in regards to let's see, the contracts and things like that, I know you talked about the different signing bonuses and those type of things. Yeah. How do you kind of differentiate the offers with the players you represent?
Well, first of all, the thing that is important, and it was one of the first lessons that was taught when I went to that agent seminar with Lee Steinberg and Chris Cabot, is having a pulse on what's most important to your player, in terms of, everything in reference to their career, location, security, career, long-term status, goals, etc. And so when you're trying to, differentiate between offers, a lot of that factors into it, right? So, if we have a couple, 2 or 3 different options, one of the things I love to have my players do leading up to the draft is I have them rank all 32 teams. And I have them rank them however they see fit. I give them very little direction. The only direction I give them is, if you had to rank these teams in order of who you want to play for, keeping in mind not only who you want to play for, but the system, the city, the market, your weather preferences. Do you want to be in a state that has no income tax? All of those things. I need you to rank these 32 teams, and I've done that for every player I've ever represented. And so when you have that as kind of your foundation, and after they do it, I talk to them about it too. We discuss certain things, and we might move things. We might move a couple of things up and down. We might move, we might adjust it, but we have our list. So then when we start to circle through the options in terms of teams that have shown interest, we try to simplify to the fact that, okay, now that we've ranked these teams, and now that we have these offers, how does it change our list, or does it change it at all, or do we just go by the ranking system? And I just try to simplify for them, man. I mean, and a lot of that is just communication leading up to doing the work beforehand, so that, especially in an undrafted situation, because once again, the 90% of those undrafted players, they don't have the luxury of sitting on offers and waiting it out and waiting for some team. You got to decide, because teams aren't waiting for you. If you're the top 10%, you can play it a little bit, but 90% of those guys need to make a decision. So I try to just make it clear to them as possible in terms of what they're looking at, and base it off that.
Gotcha.
You try not to overcomplicate it. At the end of the day, the most important thing for an undrafted guy is making the team. All that contract stuff don't matter if you're not on the active roster anyway. So where can we go that best allows you to make the team? And you put it in terms like that, then it makes the decision pretty easy.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Now I've got to ask, man, what's your most interesting story that you got since you've been involved being an agent, of course, with a client, maybe a client and a team, perhaps?
That's a good question. So I don't know if I have really truly any interesting stories. Most of my experience with teams have been pretty run of the mill. Nothing that's too funny or outlandish or anything like that. I guess I don't know, man. I think I accidentally sent a text to a director of pro scouting that wasn't meant to go to him. It was just basically just saying I would like a burger order, like a burger. And it was like, what? It was just something where my thumb hit the wrong chat, the wrong conversation in the iMessage screen. Everything's been pretty straightforward in terms of just normal communication with teams, man. I haven't had, you do have your general things that all agents talk about in terms of when you speak with a team, they tell you one thing and it ends up being another. Um, you know, it's, uh, it's you do have that. It's very interesting behind the scenes. Obviously, I'm still young in the game in terms of my years of experience. I'm 5 years in, so I'm not like a newbie or anything like that. But I don't have the plethora of experience from like a lot of your agents that are really the movers and shakers of the industry. I'll be there one day, but I'm not there yet. So I don't have this big treasure chest of stories to say. Um, but definitely probably the accidental burger text to a guy. He was like, "Man, no worries, man." So, yeah.
Now, what's something interesting that no one think an agent would have to do or go through in terms of being an agent?
To become an agent or just being an agent, period.
Just being an agent in general.
So the recruiting, man, the recruiting, and I can answer that so many ways, man. I'm a big fan of college football, huge fan, man, and even though these guys are young and in college, you kind of forget, man. You watch you guys on TV; they're really big, really muscular, very talented individuals. You see them do interviews, and you kind of forget how young they are at times because, especially those big programs like OU and Alabama and Ohio State, those guys are so used to being the center of attention and getting the media attention that they come across just like you hear the guys playing for the Giants or the Cowboys or the Jaguars or whatever. Like you kind of combine them all in one and you forget that these are kids. And so I'm in an industry where you have to recruit kids to eat. It don't to be an agent, it don't matter. You could be the best negotiator in the world, like the very best. You could be working for the CIA because your negotiation skills are so excellent. But it don't matter if you can't recruit because you won't negotiate anything if you have no clients or nothing, no good
Right.
clients. So recruiting is the lifeblood of being an agent, and to recruit, you got to recruit college guys, and that's interesting. It's always interesting, man, in multiple ways. Um, what you come to realize is these guys are people, and I know this is like duh, everybody's people, but I really want to humanize them for a second. We see them on TV; they do amazing things every Saturday and they seem like superheroes. And we see the community work they do. We see them, every program is going to showcase on social media when they invite, you know, kids who have special needs or whatnot to come and see a practice. We see that side, but you got to remember these are still just regular people at the end of the day. And just like any people, they come in all different type of personality types and they're also still growing and still maturing. So as an agent, I have good stories from. There was a kid that I recruited a couple years ago, and he was an IBM intern. I mean, while being a student athlete, and I think he was like an engineering major, and he was excelling at all of it. Grades were excellent, football skills were excellent, and this dude was an IBM intern at that, and if I recall correctly, had a standing offer for employment with IBM after college,
Huh.
and this was a big defensive end, not a quarterback, not your center, which I know centers are big, but centers are typically known as brainiacs. This is a D end. Um, I've talked with kids who had, engineering majors or finance majors or, they really took academics seriously and they just didn't do the easy, general studies just to get through. I've spoken with kids who like they were nervous when they got on the phone with me, like super nervous. I mean, one word answers, stuttering, and I'm a stutterer. So when I talk about us person that stutters, I'm only talking about myself as someone who grew up with a major stuttering problem. But just like deer in headlights. But they go out every Saturday and they smacking dudes up. But you get them on the phone and They're like, man, sorry, sir. And, it's like, um, but with that said, they're still kids, so they do kid things. So one of the most frustrating thing as an agent is you talk to a kid all year and you have really good rapport with them. I mean, calling you, texting you, they calling you big bro and OG and all this stuff. And even though as an agent, you're still recruiting, you know that the job's not done. Uh, you thinking you're going to be at least in his final like cut, like down to his final 2 or 3 selections, and you're not too naive to think that there's not at least one other agent that maybe he has really good rapport with as well. So you still might lose him. But what it hurts is most of those agent decisions happen in late December, early January. It hurts when in November or early December they just go ghost. Keep it in mind, these are kids, so their people skills not all the way developed yet. So instead of saying, "Hey, Lonnie, man, I appreciate you taking time to speak with me. I'm actually going to I've narrowed down my choices to this, yada yada yada. But thank you." Like I would love that. I don't expect them as much as you'd want them to call you so that you can try to build some sort of defense, or you try to can save him so you can hang around more to continue to recruit him. I know that's a tough conversation. They don't want to cut you. They don't want to like walk away from, especially if they like the conversation, like you like the conversation. But at least would like a text, like, "Hey, man, appreciate it." I might say a little something in response to try to, once again, try to stay in the mix. But once a kid tells me, he's moving on, and that's it, I respect his wishes. A lot of kids just go ghost. They stop communicating. Uh, when they were real responsive before, they would always respond to your text. They don't respond. They don't respond. And it's always funny when you meet those guys, you see them at an all-star game or something like that, or you see them wherever you see them, and it's like this awkwardness. And I pay attention to people. Like I don't ever want to rub nobody the wrong way or make somebody feel some type of way. So I'm not petty where I'm going to go up like, "Hey, man, what's up, man? You remember me? You went ghost, yada yada yada." But I also don't want to ignore the kid or anything like that. So it's always just kind of that awkwardness where you're like, "Do you want to talk to me? Like, are we cool?" Like, it's cool, man. Like, I'm cool. You cool? Like, and they're like, "Oh," and then, it actually happened this year. And man, me and the dude we connected and talked, and it was in my head all the time. I didn't ask, but I so want to say, "Bro, you see how natural this is? See how natural we're conversating right now? Like, this is so natural. What in the world happened? Like, why'd you just disappear on me like that? And now we talking again like nothing happened. Like, isn't this what you should want?" But I didn't. I just kept the conversation. So I think for most people outside looking in, it's we get to see kids. We get to see. I've heard. I know what programs have good reputation in terms of college programs have good reputation from the coaching staff. I know. Some of the people might be looking some of the favorite programs that players actually hate, like a consensus amount. Coaches that are hated, what these players deal with, uh, what they do from a social media standpoint. The hate. I mean, I talked to a player last year that would just get killed on social media. I mean, constantly got hate messages and DMs. Um, but also the ups and downs of being an agent. We deal with a lot of disappointment. It's a lot of nervousness, especially during this time of the year. It's a lot of uneasiness as guys go through the preseason trying to make the roster. You really are living in the moment of now, and that's for recruiting as well. You're happy one day. I mean, I got eliminated from a first round type player for this upcoming draft. Talking with the parents and the highs and lows of that. And one day you're thinking you're good, not that you're going to earn the business, but that you're going to be able to make it at least to the final list or final cut. One day you're good, next day they're like, cutting their list down already. And so it's a lot of emotions. It's a lot of ups and downs. And so you have to truly have a moral compass or pillars to really get through, because it can be as great as some things it says, like seeing one of your clients get to experience putting on the NFL colors for the first time. There's also a lot of downs where, having to pick a guy up because he got cut or he's getting a workout and he's not being kept. He's being sent back home. There's a lot of that stuff that can pull on you as well. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a lot of ins and outs of the agent life, man.
Yeah.
And I thank you again for coming on. For those that aren't aware, this is NFL agent Lonnie Nichols with me tonight. I just want to thank you for your time and kind of breaking down a few things on the other side of the game. If you want to, you can tell everybody where they can reach you or anything you have going on.
Yeah, man. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, Agent Lonnie Nick. It's just Nichols, but without the OLS. Or you can just search Lonnie Nichols, you'll still find me. Man, I'm as far as the stuff going on, man, just busy recruiting season, so nothing too eventful. Just doing my normal thing this time of year, recruiting and watching the guys our agency have go through preseason, man. So that's about it.
Gotcha. And
Yeah.
I know you probably combing them college rosters probably already, right?
Yeah, man. I regionalize it quite a bit. So I'm in Oklahoma City, so I pay attention to a lot of Big 12 schools and kind of the schools that fall within that same geographic map. And so, yeah, man, combing those rosters, looking at potential fits. So, yeah.
Well, I will say this, man. Hopefully, when Texas and Oklahoma come to the SEC, you can actually kind of leave a little bit too and kind of look at some of those rosters too, perhaps.
Oh man, I'm an OU alum, man, so I'm excited. I'm excited. Oklahoma State friends, they not too happy with us OU people, but at the end of the day, man, those programs gotta look out what's best of their interest. So I'm happy and looking forward to wrecking shop in SEC, man.
So wrecking shop. Okay.
Oh,
All
wrecking
right.
shop, man. Yeah, OU's a blue blood, man. You put OU with SEC recruiting and SEC colors, and I'm sorry, SEC labels and SEC recruiting, man. We're a different program then. So yeah.
Well, I do have like 3 guys from University of Tennessee on your team this year.
We do.
Yep.
We do. So
there you go. Yeah, I guess I'm a Tennessee fan from way back when I was a kid. So
yeah,
it's definitely been some lean years these last few years.
Oh yeah, man, it's been a little while since y'all been able to kind of poke your chest out pretty heavy, man. So.
Yeah. It's definitely been a minute. Well, again, I want to thank you for coming on, man. And this has been Touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton.
Appreciate you, Mike.